Welcome to the Mark Philpott Inside Sport YouTube channel, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about the 2022 FIFA World Cup tournament. Well, as a fan of many sporting events around the world, I'm always excited every 4 years when the World Football Cup comes around. But as a special rugby fan, I'm really interested to see what these soccer boys get up to. So I was excited to see what was going to happen in Qatar in 2022. Now, I'm not going to be talking about anything to do with the politics or the location of the World Cup in Qatar. Everybody has an opinion on that, and they're free to do so. I'm just going to be focusing in this video on the great football tournament that it was. And let's start off in talking about the group stages. So some of the groups had some really dynamic teams in them that were going to confront each other with some very savoury fixtures to start off with, and we were wondering who was going to come out on top. But I don't think anyone was picking the upset that we had in Group C to start off with, and that was when Argentina went down 2-1 against Saudi Arabia. Now, I don't think many bookies would have had Saudi Arabia up there as a winning option for the World Cup, but I guess this game really gave us an insight as to how amazing this World Cup was going to be. And as a rugby fan, I'm always interested in seeing the underdog come up. So in that first game, when we saw Saudi Arabia beat Argentina 2-1, everybody was starting to talk about, are Argentina going to be out in the group stages of this particular World Cup? We also had our next upset in Group E when Japan beat Germany 2-1. So we were already excited at the fact that both Germany and Argentina might be on their way out of this World Cup in the group stages. It was a fantastic game by the Japanese. They ran for the whole 80 minutes plus to beat the Germans 2-1. And it started to indicate that we were going to see some fantastic performances throughout this entire World Cup by the teams from Asia and other continents, and not just relying on the European powerhouses and the South American powerhouses in this particular tournament. In Group E, we saw Spain demolish Costa Rica 7-0, and we thought, well, Costa Rica hasn't got much to give in this World Cup. I went through my list of other sports to see whether Costa Rica has a strong sporting heritage in other sport, because it didn't seem to be that football was going to be their thing in 2022. The other team that quickly came on the radar was the Australian team. They bet Tunisia in Group D 1-0. And many were thinking that Australia might do a couple of upsets in this tournament. So it's going to be interesting to see how they proceeded in the tournament. But just before we got all comfortable and thinking that we'd started to pick some of our favourites, we had the Group E match between Costa Rica and Japan. Everybody thought that Japan was going to be able to keep on their winning streak, but Costa Rica beat them 1-0. And all of a sudden, after being thrashed by Spain, Costa Rica were back in the picture. I feel as though Japan really slipped up in this game because they had an opportunity to really put themselves in an extra strong position in the group, but going down 1-0 to Costa Rica really cost them dearly in the end. Over in Group F, we were also seeing some upsets where Morocco came bouncing onto the scene, and they beat Belgium 2-1. Now, Belgium have been the world #1 team previous going into this tournament, and there was a lot of speculation around how Belgium were going to perform. A lot of people said they were going to struggle in this tournament, and others thought they were just saving themselves to have another strong run through to the semis and perhaps even the final in this World Cup. But Morocco really shined through in that game against Belgium and just showed how many talented players they had. In Group D, Australia continued their great performances with a 1-0 victory over Denmark. A match where I think many would have picked Denmark to beat Australia, but the Australians stood up again, and it really looked like Australia was going to progress out of the group stage after that particular match. Then we had the upset where Tunisia in Group D bet France 1-0, but at that stage France had already booked their place through to the next round, and they fielded a team that was lacking some of their superstars. But well done, Tunisia. You still had to go out there and do it, and they did beat the French team 1-0. Japan bounced back in Group E by beating Spain 2-1, and who would have thought that Japan would have beaten Germany and Spain in their group matches? A phenomenal result, and once again Japan found that talent and found that enthusiasm across the field, where they had their wingers running strongly and they were deadly on attack with their speed and lightning force. Another great win for Japan. In Group H, we had an upset, or what I thought was an upset, with South Korea beating Portugal 2-1. And of course, a lot of emphasis on Portugal throughout this World Cup because of Cristiano Ronaldo. And again, we all have our opinions on him. Round of 16, and was Argentina, I felt, struggled to put Australia away 2-1. In the last 20 minutes of that match, it was all Australia. They were putting a lot of pressure on the Argentinians, and they almost scored an equaliser in the last few minutes. It could have gone to extra time and potentially penalties, but Argentina got through 2-1. Brazil smashed South Korea 4-1 in the quarterfinals, and it looked like Brazil were really finding their form at the right stage of the tournament. They started off very well in their group matches, and they continued that into the quarterfinals. At this stage, people were starting to talk about Argentina and Brazil as being the really strong contenders. We saw Morocco get up and they beat Spain this time on penalties 3-0. And at this stage, the world was going crazy over the Moroccans progressing in this tournament and having a fantastic tournament across the pitch. They have a lot of superstars in this team, Morocco, and they never ever say die. And I think that's one of the things we saw in this World Cup in 2022. So many teams who were apparently underdogs came out there and just gave it absolutely everything across 90 minutes, sometimes across 120 minutes, and right into penalty shootouts. In the quarterfinals, we saw Croatia rely on penalties to beat Brazil, and it was really interesting to see the different styles of play coming through in this World Cup. So Croatia got through on penalties, beating Brazil. We had Argentina against the Netherlands in the quarterfinals, and this was a game that I was looking forward to watching, and it didn't disappoint. A lot of niggles in the game. It seems as though whenever these two teams play at the World Cup, there's a lot of niggling and stupid tackles going in. I've got to say, as a rugby fan, I'm sick and tired of seeing these soccer football players falling over every opportunity they can and putting on these amazing acting performances of diving and rolling and staying on the ground. What's FIFA doing? They need to outlaw this rubbish and clean up the game, right? If this happens in rugby, you've got to either at least have half a pint of blood coming out of your head or an arm that's broken. But we see these guys falling to the ground some of the time when they're not even touched by their opposing player. A ridiculous part of football that I don't understand, and I wish somehow they were able to outlaw this of the game. Getting back to the quarterfinals, Argentina squeezed past the Netherlands on penalties, and again, Argentina up until this stage have been pretty lucky to get through their games. They weren't really playing football that would suggest that they could become World Cup finalists, let alone World Cup winners. That was my opinion anyway. I thought they could have gone out on a couple of occasions. France were up against England, and this was another great quarterfinal that everybody was anticipating. England, I felt, played very, very well. Unfortunately, Harry Kane missed a decisive penalty. Happens to the best of them. And France went through 2-1 in that particular game, although that could have really been anybody's game. And I think two top teams who could have played in the final, and it would have been a very, very solid final. So going through to the semi-finals, we have Argentina up against Croatia, and we have France against Morocco. Very different styles there. We had Croatia coming in again with that very strong structure, keeping the ball a lot, and Argentina trying to really impress themselves on the Croatians, which they did. They unlocked the key to get over top of Croatia. Ended up being a comfortable 3-0 win. And the Argentinians really won that game in the first half. So that was a really good win by Argentina. I felt for the first time in the tournament they showed domination, they showed control over a Croatia team that is really, really strong. And that was a very good win by Argentina, I felt. France up against Morocco. A lot of the global audience was hoping that Morocco were going to be able to keep this underdog streak going, but France had too much for them, and what a star-studded team this French team was throughout this tournament, and they got through 2-0 against Morocco in that particular semi-final. So going into the last matches of the World Cup, we had the third place playoff between Croatia and Morocco. Croatia 2-1 winners over Morocco, and it was the end of the Moroccan amazing tournament. I've got to give my hand to them. Fantastic performance to everybody associated with the Morocco outfit, and I'm sure this is going to build a lot of momentum in the African continent now for other teams to do well in future World Cups, and I'm sure we're going to see Morocco back, perhaps even stronger, at the next World Cup in the US, Canada and Mexico, and let's see how they can progress from there. But extraordinary performance, amazing level of football. Modra did a fantastic tournament again as the captain and the leader of that Croatian outfit. Very well coached team, very disciplined team, and they really know how to play their style of football. And yeah, I was impressed, even though they play a fairly boring game of football. Then we're on to the final, Argentina against France, and well, who could have picked this one? This was like an epic final at Wimbledon between Nadal and Federer. It was like an amazing rugby union final that we had in 2015 between the All Blacks and Australia, and it wasn't until Beauden Barrett in that particular game ran away and scored that amazing try to put the All Blacks in the lead and going on to win that particular Rugby World Cup. But in this game, it was all Argentina in the first half. Amazing performance over France. Di Maria, a special mention about him. He was playing amazing out there on the right wing and causing France all sorts of havoc. But one thing stuck in my mind was that I thought that Argentina was burning up a lot of matches in that first half. They really were putting in an outstanding performance, and I was wondering whether that was going to come back to bite them a little bit in the second half. But with the goals that they'd already scored by halftime, like many others around the world, I was expecting Argentina to go away and win this quite easily. And let's face it, we all know what happened in the last 10 minutes of the main time in that particular match. It was absolutely extraordinary. Mbappe came through with the goods, and what an outstanding talent that guy is. I don't know how it would feel to score 3 goals, a hat-trick in a World Cup final, and be on the losing team. It just doesn't seem to be right. But when we're writing the script for this particular World Cup final, everything went out the window, and the last 10 minutes of normal time just set us up brilliantly for what was going to unfold for the rest of that game. Now, when Messi scored in extra time, like many others around the world, I thought that was it. This is Argentina finally putting their hands around the World Cup. But of course, it wasn't over, and France got back to pushing us into penalties. Argentina, the fairy tale, the Messi story, everything came to fruition. The only thing that didn't happen for Messi on that day was he didn't end up with a golden boot. That was Mbappe's from France. He scored 8 goals in the tournament. Messi ended up with 7. And in case you're wondering, there was 4 red cards in last year's FIFA World Cup. So just 4 people got sent off in the whole tournament. It was, in my view, an outstanding tournament of football. It showed how the world has come together to be in terms of better quality of football. And some of those games were actually edge of the seat stuff. I can remember watching the South Korea team huddled together on the halfway line, waiting for the outcome of other games for a few minutes before they knew that they were actually through to the next phase of their particular set. So it was really incredible. There were so many good games. I could have spent another half an hour talking about the tournament, of course. So as a rugby fan, how do I summarise it? Well, I think it was all fantastic. A couple of things that annoyed me throughout the whole tournament was the inconsistency around the timing, the extra time that was being added on. We were seeing games going for 10 or 15 minutes extra in different halves because of time stoppages, which is fair enough, but we've got to look at the reasons why these stoppages are happening. Every time there's a goal scored, we have 11 guys going up and having a big hug and a big cuddle. Again, we don't see this in rugby union very much. And then, of course, we have all this time wasting with fouls, or intentional fouls or unintentional fouls, where players are just falling on the ground and creating all these big theatrics which is, I think, a real downside of the whole sport of soccer at this level. Something needs to be done about it. They need to work out or give out maybe yellow cards or even red cards for these players that are actually falling on the ground without even being touched by their opposition. Some of the tackles were pretty brutal, I will hand that out, but the majority of play acting that we saw took away a little bit of the grandeur of this particular World Cup in my eyes. I'd be keen to hear what you think. Was there too much of that in this World Cup, or as a non-football fan, am I over-dramatising this? Am I seeing it a little bit more to what it actually is? I'm not somebody that sits down every weekend and watches the Premier League or La Liga or whatever. This is one of the only times that I get to watch football at this level around the world. So really interested to hear what your thoughts are around the World Cup. Did you like the underdogs winning? Were you shocked and surprised to see Brazil and Germany and Spain go out? And what were some of your other thoughts about the individual players? Mappy, again, was outstanding for France. Of course, we cannot go beyond the Messi story. But also there was some other fantastic stories as far as players. Who was your favourite player in the tournament? And what did you think of Cristiano Ronaldo's performance for Portugal and all the off-field antics as well? Well, that's it. That's my quick summary for the FIFA World Cup 2022, an outstanding sporting tournament spectacle, and can't wait for the next 4 years now until we see it all over again and seeing whether some of these other teams can get to the semi-finals and finals of the World Cup. Thanks very much for watching my video. If you like my content, I'm back on deck now after having COVID-19, so you can look forward to a lot more of sporting videos here on Mark Philpott Inside Sport. Hit the subscribe button, hit the little bell notification, and you'll be reminded every time I drop a video. Going in 2023, some amazing sporting events coming up, and of course we have the Rugby World Cup coming up this year in France, and I'll be following that tournament in detail and watching all of the matches and reviewing them here on this particular channel. So until next time, have a great day everybody, and I'll see you again soon.